In the Captain of Oil Rig 32, the terrifying rules we follow to survive the haunted depths, I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, the air thickened. Cold crept in, wrapping around me like a shroud. I stood there, pulse racing, heart pounding in my chest. What was waiting beyond that creaky threshold? Every morning, I follow the same routine. Coffee in hand, I check the gauges, scan the horizon, breathe in the salty mist. But today, something felt off. The waves crashed harder, the wind moaned louder. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision. Whispers in the night had warned meetings aren't right down here. I could feel the darkness pressing against me, not just from the sky, but from within the rig itself. The steel walls groaned as if alive, shifting, breathing. I glanced around. No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they're just too terrified to admit what's real. My stomach knotted up. Then came the noises, clanking from deep within the bowels of the rig. A haunting scrape that sent chills down my back. I wanted to ignore it, to chalk it up to old machinery, but I couldn't. Each sound echoed in my mind. Each moment drew me closer to the door I promised myself I wouldn't open. I stepped back, gripping the railing. The salt water stung my eyes as a ripple of dread washed over me. The whispers grew louder, insistent. You're not alone. I scanned the shadows. Had that light just flickered? My heart raced. I felt the temperature drop. Could that be a figure? Just for a second, I thought I saw something watching me through the porthole. I blinked, and it was gone. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the rising tide of panic. Suddenly, the lights went out. Complete darkness. I heard the frantic breaths of my crew, the pounding of my heart in my ears. I moved, one hesitant step at a time, toward that door. My fingers grazed the handle, and the world stilled. And then it happened. A loud crash echoed through the rig. Something lurched against the wall. My stomach flipped. I turned around, breath catching in my throat. The shadows shifted. Something was there. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The crash reverberated through the rig, a heavy metallic groan that sent chills down my spine. I pivoted on my heel, heart racing, eyes straining to pierce the obsidian void that had swallowed the familiar environment whole. The darkness was oppressive, almost suffocating, and I could feel fear wrapping around my throat as I fought the instinct to flee. As I stood frozen, I heard it again, the thud of something heavy against steel, more defined this time, accompanied by a dragging sound. My mind raced. Was it one of my crew? A trick of the light? I squinted into the dark, searching for movement, for a familiar silhouette, anything to ground me in this reality. Is anyone there? I called out, my voice breaking slightly, swallowed by the shadows. The only reply was the distant echo of the waves slamming against the rig. Then, an answer, soft, almost playful, sliding through the cracks in the air. Captain, the chill that swept through me was like ice water pooling in my veins. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself that my mind was playing tricks. But there it was again, louder. Captain, an invitation or a warning? I couldn't tell. I felt the cold against my back, drawing me toward the door. The whispers danced in my ears like a long-lost lover calling me home. It was as if something was pulling me toward the breach in the wall, that cursed door I had been so close to opening moments ago. I dared a glance towards it and caught a glimpse of something. Flickering, indistinct, just on the periphery of my vision, but it felt undeniably alive, teeming with the restless energy of countless souls trapped within. Turn back. A raspy voice echoed from the pitch-black expanse before me. My blood ran cold. It sounded like a former worker, lost to the depths. You don't belong here. I felt the weight of history pressing on my chest, the memories of those who had vanished into the dark. The rig was a tomb, a pit of despair where echoes of the lost wandered endlessly. Suddenly, the lights surged back to life, bathing everything in a harsh yellow glow. I blinked, disoriented, and that's when I noticed Ida figure standing at the end of the corridor, shrouded in darkness. My breath hitched. The figure was tall, features obscured by shadows, but something about its posture sent raw fear spiraling through me. Captain, it leaned forward, the voice warping into a chorus of many, layered with grief and rage. Join you. As I stumbled back, heart racing anew, and the lights flickered again, casting elongated shadows that twisted oddly on the walls. The whispers morphed from inviting to something darker, more sinister. They're waiting. They're hungry. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I turned to run, but as I did, the corridor shifted, the walls stretching impossibly, as if the structure itself was conspiring against me. The floor beneath my feet trembled, and I gasped as I found myself skidding into a chain of doors. One of them swung open, as if beckoning me closer. Out of instinct, I reached out, fingers brushing the rusted handle, and began to pull it closed, but not before a pallid hand shot out, gripping my wrist, icy as the depths of the ocean. Stay! My blood turned to ice. It was a face I never wanted to see again, one of my crew, eyes wide with fear, mouth moving but no sound emerging, like a fish gasping for air. In that instant, reality twisted, and I was lost. The figure behind me let out a low, rumbling laugh that echoed off the steel, seeping into my bones. You can't escape, and then everything went black again. The last sensation before the plunge into darkness was the sinking feeling of dread as a voice resonated in my mind, something ancient, something monstrous. Welcome to our depths, and then, nothing. The darkness enveloped me, thick as smoke, suffocating my thoughts and twisting my senses. For what felt like an eternity, I floated in the void, my heartbeat loud and frantic in my ears, mingling with the distant howl of the wind. It became a melody of terror, the unyielding echo of a dreadful song, as if the very air were infused with the howls of tormented souls seeking salvation. Suddenly, a flash of silver light pierced through the gloom, illuminating my cramped surroundings just for a heartbeat. I found myself sprawled on the cold, metallic floor of a small, confined room. Panic surged through me as I recognized the claustrophobic chamber storage unit repurposed for holding spare equipment. But instead of the expected tools and machinery, something else thrived in that dim ambience. Shadows shifted along the walls, ripples of darkness that flickered and danced, teasing my imagination with the specters of trapped souls. And then, among the shadows, something caught my eye, a glint of white, sharp like the crescent moon at midnight. I stumbled forward, heart racing with both fright and curiosity. There, nestled in a pile of rusted parts, lay a series of old photographs. Air rushed from my lungs as I recognized the faces captured in glossy stillness. All of them familiar, yet twisted, a crew long gone, their hollow eyes staring blankly. The images soaked my heart with despair, accompanied by the inevitable realization that they were all connected, each one of them disappearing into the maw of the rig's darkness like threads pulled from a once vibrant tapestry. The air thickened as dread seeped into my bones. A growing sense of being observed prickled at the back of my neck. When I turned, the shadows tightened, and I found myself being watched not by the still figures on the walls, but something far more insidious, something lurking in the Stygian corners, hungry and resentful. Join us! The voice seeped into my mind again, a chorus of pleas intertwined with agonizing cries. They were filled with remorse, longing, and something more, a desperate need for company in their eternal damnation. You know the rules, Captain. My flesh crawled with the weight of their expectation. An instinct kicked, I had to get out. I scrambled toward the exit, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm as I pushed through the door, but it was no longer the same corridor. It twisted, elongating into a grotesque landscape, steel walls pulsating as if they were alive. Turn back. Captain, they're not here for you. The whispers returned, each voice now layered with the resonance of 1,000 breaths, converging into a harrowing chorus of despair. They want what's inside you. I shook my head violently, stumbling against the walls, desperate to remind myself of my purpose, the mission, the drilling, the oil, the prize, the very lifeblood of our endeavors. But the memories warped, nagging sensations whispering that I wasn't going to escape. I was forever linked to this place, my fate intertwined with theirs. Staggering forward, I suddenly found myself in the control room, the screens flickering with static beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. The shadows coiled around the equipment, stretching into grotesque forms that twisted and morphed with each blink. My eyes darted to the windows, the endless black ocean swirling violently outside. I grabbed the nearest radio receiver, hoping to reach the remaining crew members. Mayday! Mayday! This is Captain Harris of Oil Rig 32. We need immediate assistance. My voice fought against the enveloping dread, but all I received in response was an eerie silence, a stillness that felt almost mocking to in the persistent quiet. I noticed a whispering fog coiling around the room, a threatening presence moving closer. My heart sank. The whispers grew more intense, urging me to abandon hope. You've dived too deep. They won't let you go, with urgency coursing through my veins. I turned back to the door, but it had vanished, replaced by a wall of darkness that seemed to swell and breathe with a life of its own. Behind you the voices echoed, sending my blood to ice. I whipped around, and there it was, a figure emerging from the shadows, its face a mask of the crew, twisted and silent, knitted with shadows and malevolence. Join us, Captain, it rasped, reaching out with an outstretched arm that flickered out of existence and back into the folds of shadows, while another voice slivered through the static-filled room, chilling me to the bone, as if whispered from the depths of hell. It's hungry, it's time. I stumbled backward, my lungs screaming for air, and just as I turned to flee, the ground beneath me heaved violently, and everything erupted in darkness once more. But before everything faded out, the last thing I heard echoed through the blackness like a death knell. You're one of us now, Captain. Welcome home. The darkness was alive, a creature that pulsed and writhed with a sentience of its own. I inhaled deeply, the thick air tasting of rust and despair, wrapping around my lungs like barbed wire. The stillness was oppressive, the weight of uncertainty pressing against me as I dared to move. The place felt claustrophobic, the walls shifting in my periphery as if they were watching, waiting for me to make the next move. Suddenly, a low hum filled the chamber, vibrating through the floor and sending shivers of dread down my spine. The screens flickered back to life, bathed in an eerie blue light that cast elongated shadows across the room. Data scrolled chaotically, lines and numbers that seemed to warp and twist in nonsensical patterns, while the ghostly forms of the crew lingered in the corners of my vision, whispering my name like a siren's call. Find the truth, Captain, you must dive deeper, they murmured, their words a beckoning lilt that tugged at the frayed edges of my sanity. Each syllable wrapped around my thoughts, weaving a tapestry of fear and curiosity where the edge of reason frayed. I stumbled back from the screens, shaking my head in defiance. They were trying to consume me, devour the remnants of my will. I need to find a way out, I muttered to myself, gripping the counter desperately, my fingers slipping against its greasy surface. Then I heard its soft, scuttling noise echoing from the ventilation shafts above. My stomach churned as I looked up, heart racing. Something was crawling through the darkened passages, something alive and hungry, its presence creeping ever closer. The air shifted, carrying a putrid stench that prickled my senses. Below it waits for you. Below the whispers grew louder, a crescendo of dread enveloping me from all sides that I turned away from the unseen menace, focusing instead on the only remaining exit, the hatch leading down into the bowels of the rig. It had been a long time since I had accessed the lower levels, a place cursed by superstition and fear, haunted by echoes of the past. But I had no choice. It was either descend into darkness or succumb to the shadows taunting me above. With hesitation clawing at my insides, I approached the hatch and forced it open. An icy breath met me, swirling and beckoning, filled with promises and secrets. The rickety metal stairs spiraled down into the abyss, each step reverberating with the weight of the fallen, and I gripped the railing, half expecting a hand to reach from the shadows and pull me back. As I descended, the temperature dropped sharply. The faintest whisper of water dripped somewhere in the distance, a reminder of the liquid grave just outside the walls. My heart sank as the smell of decay hit my nostrils, thick as a fog, filling me with a sense of impending doom. Reaching the bottom, I found myself in a corridor engulfed in suffocating darkness, illuminated only by a distant glowing light that flickered like a dying star. The walls were damp and cold, as though the ship itself was exhaling its last breath. I stepped forward, propelled by a mixture of trepidation and adrenaline, each footfall echoing like a drumbeat of my impending fate. Suddenly, a loud crash resonated from behind me, reverberating through the hall and making my heart race. I spun around, eyes wide as I scanned the shadows. A figure materialized from the dark, elongated and disfigured, its form dripping with an ooze that glistened, catching the flicker of light in front of me. It slithered across the ground swiftly, an aberration, its many eyes glinting like shards of broken glass. I froze, terror gripping my spine like icy pincers. It's hungry, it wants you. The chorus from before erupted in my mind, a horrifying reminder of my fate. Without a moment's thought, I dashed toward the light, desperate to escape whatever horror lurked behind me. The flickering glow grew closer, morphing into a familiar sight, the old generator room. It pulsed with life amidst the decay, radiating promise and respite. Yet something felt terribly wrong. As I veered through the door, eager to barricade myself within, a chilling realization stopped me. On the wall, graffiti seethed in red paint, hastily scrawled messages spelling out desperate warnings, reminders of those before me. Don't turn back. IT watches your every move. Find the key, you won't make it alone. A loud bang echoed through the corridor, shaking the walls as if an unseen force had crashed into them. The air grew thick with dread as I felt the shadows behind me press forward, coiling around my ankles like serpents, the whispers escalating into a cacophony. Join us, Captain, they chorused once again, the monstrous figure lurking in the shadows now a breath away. I swallowed hard, heart pounding against my chest. I could either run deeper into my fate or face the horror chasing me with a defiance that felt both foolish and brave. But then, in the instant before I made my choice, the generator sputtered and flickered once more, revealing a horrific secret behind the veil of darkness, a reflection caught in the glass, showing not just my terrified face, but the crew members, their twisted forms grinning hungrily from the shadows. Join us, they echoed, as the lights burst into darkness again, leaving me in an abyss of dreadful uncertainty. The last thing I felt was their cold grasp pulling me back, a promise of eternity stretching before me. And all I could utter amid the chaos was a silent plea for salvation. What have I done? But their laughter filled the void, binding me to the cursed rig. In an instant, the once comforting shadows became my prison, as the darkness closed in around me. And then it whispered my name, Captain. The darkness enveloped me like a heavy shroud, muffling the chaos behind me. I felt my pulse quicken, drumming a frantic rhythm against my ribcage as I stumbled backward into the generator room. The hum of machinery was maddening, a stark contrast to the sinister quiet of the corridor beyond. My mind raced. I was caught between the echoing laughter of the damned and an insatiable dread creeping ever closer. I turned towards the generator, my frantic eyes scanning its components. Its spindled guts were exposed, wires frayed and sparks sputtering, a specter of the dying beast gurgling before me. If I could ignite it, perhaps I could fend off whatever lurked on the other side. I grasped the tool nearest to me, an old wrench caked with rust. I had to act. Instinctively, I dropped to my knees, desperate to untangle the remnants of circuits and leverage their flickering life. Yet as I fumbled with the machinery, the darkness thickened, curling toward me with an almost sentient hunger. The closer it came, the more I could feel it seeping into my veins, pulling the breath from my lungs and tainting my thoughts. I could almost hear the whispers sharpening into clarity, caressing my mind with torturous familiarity. Free us, Captain. Panic surged within me, my fingers deftly working at the generator despite an unnatural chill fluttering at my nape. I thought of the crew, their lost souls floating in this hell. A knife twisted in my gut. No, I shouted into the dark, straining to drown out their voices. You're not real. But the generator exploded with a deluge of light, illuminating the room in a blinding flash that cut through the darkness, revealing a multitude of twisted faces just beyond the threshold. They writhed, their eyes black holes filled with endless despair, mouths agape in silent screams of agony and desire. I staggered backward under the weight of their gaze, a lighthouse beam revealing monsters hidden amidst shadows. Right before me, their faces were contorted in grotesque anticipation of my surrender. Then, In the frantic haze of desperation, something brushed against my ankle, something wet and cold. I stumbled, turning to face the ground where what I feared the most lay waiting. Tentacles, slick and wriggling, pulled against my skin, dragging me towards the threshold of the generator. No. Get off! I screamed, lurching back and swinging the wrench wildly. As it struck one of the appendages, a sickening pop echoed in the cramped space, followed by a shuddering shriek that reverberated through the walls. The tendril recoiled, retreating into the shadows, a grotesque cacophony of pain rising from the depths beyond the door. But amidst that momentary victory, dread bore down on me as I heard another set of calamitous noises from deeper within the rig. A series of bangs and scrapes echoed through the metal corridors, an unsettling harmony that felt almost musical in its brutality. The shadows behind me writhed with renewed ferocity. They were regrouping, reorganizing, eager for their feast. Suddenly, the generator sputtered, its light flickering like a dying star gasping for breath in a consumed world. I turned back to it frantically, desperate to revive its pulsating glow, but a stench of decay enveloped me, forcing the bile up from my stomach. I was on the precipice of madness, ensnared in a future that loomed darker than the void itself. The generator wheezed one last time, plunging me into a trembling half-light. A figure appeared at the doorstep, shrouded in a tattered shroud of shadows. Its outline rippled, limbs bending at unnatural angles, as it stepped toward me, revealing more of its haunting form, that I was enveloped by its stenching oppressive wave of rot washing over me as it smiled, rows of jagged teeth glistening like shards of glass in the flickering darkness. But what paralyzed me most was the darkness in its eyes, an abyss that mirrored my own terror, staring back and beckoning me into its welcoming void. The whispers cascaded around me, now a symphony of torment echoing through the room. Join us. We are countless, Captain. You alone cannot fight us. With heart racing and shadows curling nearer, I grasped my wrench, resolve faltering in the face of this impossible horror. I had to act, but the walls tightened around me, the air thick with the dread of the unforgiving depths. Before I could scream, the ground beneath my feet shuddered violently, crumbling and cracking, a chasm yawning open that promised to swallow me whole. In that moment of terror, I realized I was not the hunter. I was the prey. As the ground gave way, I plummeted into darkness, swallowed by an abyss. Every scream silenced in the echo of despair, and all I could see was the hollow gaze of the creature awaiting my arrival in the depths. Its laughter chased me down, an echoing promise as the shadows enveloped my world. And against the agonizing pull of consciousness, I gasped my final thought. What lies beneath? Then there was silence, an overwhelming, deafening silence. The fall felt eternal. Darkness gripped me, shredding the remnants of my sanity as I spiraled deeper into an endless abyss. Time lost all meaning. The weight of nothingness pressed down on me like an unyielding hand, threatening to crush the hope that clung feebly to life within my chest. As I plunged through the void, memories danced in my mind. The raucous laughter of my crew, the camaraderie we had built on the rig, their smiles masked with a shared sense of purpose, now twisted into fragments of despair. Then, with a bone-rattling thud, I landed in a gritty slurry that engulfed me. A cold, viscous substance oozed around my limbs, pulling me deeper as I fought against it. I scrambled to push upward, gasping for air that never came, but every movement only dragged me further into the blackness. I caught glimpses of the walls surrounding Meslick and pulsating, alive with a torment that made my skin crawl. Choking back panic, I reached out, my fingers brushing against the corroded surface of what I might have once called the rig, now an alien landscape twisted by horrors beyond imagination. I could feel something slithering beneath the muck, mapping my movements. It was alive, thrumming with a pulsing heartbeat that thrummed against my bones, whispering in a language that twisted my thoughts in knots. Then a familiar timbre cut through the obsidian veil. Captain, join us. It was Isaac, my second in command, his voice blending into a crown of tormented souls pressed against my mind. I twisted, searching for his visage, the flicker of a memory that would anchor me to reality. But the sight that greeted me instead was dismal. Isaac stood, drenched in the same grim shadow that surrounded me, his eyes hollow and sunken. His mouth twisted into an unnatural grin, revealing rows of glistening teeth that seemed too large for his face, a sick parody of a welcoming embrace. The decay clung to him like a shroud, festering with the weight of the rig's unholy burden. "Come, Captain," he urged, extending a skeletal hand. "You've always felt it, that call to let go. Here, we are free. Embrace it." Behind him surged a tide of twisted silhouettes, shadows writhing and howling, each one a haunted echo of what they once wormy crew now intermingled and lost in the unfathomable maw of darkness. Their eyes burned with an unsettling urgency, clawing for a release through the horror that enveloped us all. "No," I cried, clawing through the muck, desperate to escape their reaching hands, those shriveled reminders of humanity. My heart thundered as I struggled against the freezing grasp of despair, and I could feel the others, the things with eyes like voids, pushing against me. I had to escape this waking nightmare. Yet something surged beneath me, a writhing mass of tentacles and whispers, and I was pulled down once more, suffocating, the sound of their laughter echoing like a curse. Each breath clawed from my throat felt tainted with rot, a blend of anguish and longing swirling around me like a storm. Suddenly, I remembered the shadows. They weren't here to kill me. They wanted me to join them. They wanted my will to submit, to become a whisper in the shadows. The truth was suffocating, wrapping tighter around my throat until I felt the pressure of their sinister hope. "Join us," echoed through the darkness, and a sliver of desperation ignited within me. "No, I am the captain," I shouted, but my voice trembled with uncertainty as their answering chorus washed over me, engulfing my defiance. That it was then that the rigidity of the ground erupted. Without warning, the world shifted, collapsing in a cascade of wailing souls. I was flung backward as the walls of the abyss gave way, revealing a horrific landscape beneath the oil-ridden ocean of darkness filled with teeth and eyes, their terrible hunger gaping above me like a feast unfulfilled. I tumbled. Two arms me only salvation reached out to grapple with me, strong but buried beneath the muck. They pulled me toward the surface, their grip fevered and almost desperate, but I couldn't see their face. All I felt was the urgent pull of their presence, a sense of unity amidst this hell. The surface loomed closer, the grim laughters of the damned rising in a cacophony of dread around me. Just as I broke free from the viscous grip, gasping for the air that felt as if it were laced with fire, I heard the whispers crescendoing into a thunderous roar. "He won't save you, you belong to us." Before I could scream, the unseen arms dragged me back, deeper into a whirlpool of despair, laughter reverberating off the walls like a curse, a final promise that this wasn't the end. All I could feel, cold and constricting, was the longing of that abyss reaching for me with a hunger that was insatiable. And in that terrifying second, the lights above flickered, revealing a glimmering surface above me, a world beyond my reach where the darkness stretched impossibly wide, revealing figures I couldn't yet comprehend, a new horror illuminated in an instant. And as the laughter of the damned echoed back toward me, the voice of Isaac surged above all. "It's too late, Captain. This time, you won't escape." In chilling clarity, I realized the descent into this hell had only just begun. The suffocating grip of the abyss failed to fully take me. Instead, I found myself suspended between two worlds, half in the swirling darkness beneath, half grasping at the remnants of the oil rig that once stood as my sanctuary. I could feel the cold lash of tendrils feasting upon my essence, ugly whispers tracing intricate patterns of fear across my mind. "Captain, it's only a matter of time." Isaac's voice drifted toward me again, slithering through my thoughts like oil slicked with blood. The serenity in his tone twisted slowly, each word a jagged shard of glass. It was suffocating, filled with promises I could never mathematically fathom. With every ounce of willpower, I clawed for stability, for anything solid. My fingers found purchase on the warped metal of the rig's stairs, twisted and gnarled, as if shaped by something far worse than time itself. Each step echoed ominously, the sound swallowed by the growing cacophony lurking behind me. Shadows lunged from the corners of my vision, threatening to reclaim me. Suddenly, An unbearable pull surged through me, a contradiction of something elusive and magnetic. It was calling relentlessly, beckoning me deeper into its unholy maw. It promised liberation from this pain, whispering tales of peace and oblivion. And as the shadows flipped and writhed, I wondered, had they truly taken my crew, or had they simply given up to become something else, something I now yearned to relinquish to? I fought harder, scrambling up the stairs, my heartbeat crashing like desperate waves against doom. As I ascended, the laughter grew louder, an infectious fever that seeped into my thoughts, planting seeds of doubt. "Join us," they sang. "Let the shadows envelop you." And then, a sudden rush of cold air hit me, like a slopper reminder of the world beyond this grotesque prison. Above me, the fisheye lens of the abyss warped and bubbled like boiling tar, swirling with more souls, more lost echoes of my friend Snow, my family entwined in the dark. Dread pooled in my stomach as the realization sparked anew. They were coming for me. Just as I reached the surface, a guttural roar erupted from the depths, shaking the rig to its core. Wind whipped mercilessly, sending shivers coursing through my body. I stumbled backward as the voice of the abyss rose in fury, howling with the anguish of 1,000 souls betrayed. And there, through the ruptured haze of reality, a single, lanky silhouette emerged. It glided toward me, its body flowing like shadows, a grotesque imitation of what might have once resembled a person. The figure drew nearer, revealing sunken eyes that glimmered with malevolent intent as they settled upon my own. "Isaac," I whispered hoarsely, my heart hammering wildly against my ribs. But as it approached, more details surfaced in the wavering light. The stench of decay clouded the air, and the twisted grin felt all too familiar, horrific, yet achingly close. "It's not Isaac you should fear, Captain," it rasped, the voice layered with every memory wrapped in grief and betrayal. "It's what lies beneath you, what we have become, what you can be." Then, before I could move, a horrific transformation began. The once familiar facade of my second-in-command fractured, shards of memory glittering through the darkness as more figures emerged from the void, filling the once timid shadows, their bodies shifting and reshaping into grotesque echoes of my crew, frozen in perpetuity between grotesque mirth and inevitable despair. "Captain," they cried in unison, faces stretching into grim masks, a distorted reflection of the unity we once shared. "Are you ready to join your team?" Panic seized me. I gritted my teeth, fought against this seductive pull, but in my gut, I realized all it would take to succumb would be a single misstep, a fracture in the steely resolve I had cobbled together from the shards of my sanity. In that moment, it surged upon me. A tidal wave of grotesque silhouettes swarmed, tendrils reaching, willing to drag me down with them into the clutches of Cerberus. "What have you done, Captain? You can't escape." "Us," they screamed, voices overlapping, a cacophony of madness that bore down heavily upon my chest. I stumbled back, the rig creaking ominously, and I spun around to face the yawning chasm from which I had emerged, a monster more terrifying than my crew, more grotesque than anything I had witnessed. The darkness within beckoned, a singular pulse that offered both solace and dread. "Join us, or suffer." Their voices crescendoed to a thunderous, booming roar that rattled my bones. I teetered on the edge. The ground shook violently beneath me. The infernal allure tugged fiercely at my senses. Just as the darkness threatened to engulf me entirely, I caught a glimpse of something luminescent in the depths, an artifact shimmering with ethereal light, glistening ominously amid the chaos. Would I reach out and risk salvation, or let the abyss pull me once and for all? The answer held as much danger as it did potential redemption. With that choice looming, a chilling truth sliced into my core. I had little time left. I was already one of them, one of the damned. And then, without warning, the doorway behind me collapsed, revealing a new horror that spilled forth. The bodies of my crew, dare I say the truth themselves, pouring from the dark water, their faces twisted into gaping, silent howls, reaching for me with skeletal hands, pleading and possessing the terror of the void itself. The last flicker of light began to fade as the shadows closed in around me. It was then, in the agonizing instant of decision, I realized sometimes hope can be the most terrifying road into darkness. Save yourself, Captain. A voice screamed from the depths of the writhing madness. A final plea that shattered the silence and dragged my heart into the fetid depths. And as I spiraled upward, options scattering in the maelstrom, the shadows hissed behind me. Too late, the cavern erupted with terror as I vanished into the unknown, leaving me breathless, lost, and hopeless, dangling at the precipice of perdition, never knowing what horror awaited inside the unforgiving dark surrounding me. Euphoria faltered as I plummeted through the embrace of inky blackness. The pulse of the abyss throbbed like a living heart beneath my skin, racing to meet me with open arms. In this churning void, time fragmented into shards, each moment stretched and twisted beyond comprehension. Every instinct screamed at me to fight, to claw my way back to the remnants of the rig and its hollow promise of safety. But the abyss was so seductive, whispering softly of forgotten promises and eternal peace. My body pierced through the shadows, sinking deeper. Ghostly hands brushed against my arms, bidding me to rest in their firm embrace. Figures coalesced around me, their eyes gleaming in the dark like luminous pearls, a gathering of lost souls, the manifestations of my worst fears exacerbated in both intensity and intimacy. "Welcome, Captain," a voice oozed from the depth of a spectral figure, smooth and inviting, yet thick with decay. "We've been waiting." It was neither Isaac nor any crew member I could recognize, but an amalgamation of haunting memories, echoes of laughter, fragments of camaraderie entwined with loss. They pulled closer, arms outstretched, inviting me to surrender to the maw of despair, and with each heartbeat, the boundary between us grew thinner. "Don't you see? This is your destiny," they murmured as I struggled against the crushing gravity of their words. "The dreams you fought against bring you closer to us. You were meant to merge with the shadows." That I squeezed my eyes shut, clenching my fists. "No, I am not like you," I ground out, fighting to hold tight to my own identity. The din of their growling laughter echoed around me, harsh, delighted, exultant, and began to morph into something darker. The very essence of fear twisted around the edges of my consciousness, fingers curling around my throat. I gasped, struggling for air, as tendrils of shadowy mist slithered through my psyche, dismantling my reality piece by piece. Each fragment tore away a memory, a treasured moment with my crew, gales of laughter sailing across the waters of camaraderie. The day my daughter was born, I begged, feeling the sweat bead upon my brow, the amalgamation of their stories tugging at my grounding until I barely recognized myself. "What do you want from me?" "Only to unite," the collective murmured as if through an ancient hymn. "To experience what you can only fathom in dreams. Feel how liberating it is to cease existing as a single identity. Dive deeper, Captain, and you shall discover the truth of what we are." There was solitude in their true, the pull toward a darkness which promised clarity within the chaos. My resolve began to weaken, shadows wrapping around my heart, stifling my fervor. The faces of my crew transformed before me, their features contorting into grotesque parodies of joy. My mind began to turn like an engine. Was it wrong to seek comfort in despair? To welcome the soothing abyss when existence had become a tormenting void? A sudden noise jolted me back. Below me, the disturbance in the depths roared to life, bubbling and churning violently, as though responding to my faltering will. An impossibly massive head emerged, its shape obscured by pulsating darkness, a series of slits forming in its skin that emitted an awful screech, resonating through the caverns. The shadows fell silent, their manipulation momentarily paused, but my heart raced with a lurking dread. This presence, this new horror, was far from welcoming. "What is that?" I croaked, struggling against the current beneath. The ethereal glow slowly dimmed, revealing strange patterns sketched across the surface of the creaturia, mosaic of stories etched in the horror of ancient mariners trapped in the fold of this insatiable monster. Mindless terror gripped me as I squeezed my eyes shut, awaiting the jaws of the abyss. "An abomination," the echoed voice trembled through my soul. "It feeds on despair, Captain. It hungers for our stories, for the memories we hold so dearly." The water roiled beneath me, erupting with a force that dislodged me from my fragile hold. I was tossed toward the churning maw of this new terror, the light slipping away as darkness swallowed me whole. Tendrils shot out, grasping at my body. I clawed desperately in the thick abyss, battling against their grips, the laughter of the damned echoing louder than ever. In what felt like an eternity, I broke through the chaos into a fleeting moment of Clarissa. Glimmer of hope shone beside me, vague and flickering, illuminating a pathway through the maze of despair. Just as I reached for the light, a cold hand seized my ankle, dragging me down into an unforgiving void. "You cannot escape," the collective gasped, their voices scaling into a terrifying choir. "You belong to us now." And with one last desperate surge of strength, I screamed, the sound reverberating through the shadows, rippling outward, but the echoes of my words were consumed by a gnawing silence. The abyss answered back, a harrowing rush of darkness tumbling over me, swallowing every shred of light, every inch of fight, until all that remained was the laughter of the damned. A promise that even in the void, my story was far from over. The world blurred into an all-encompassing darkness that threatened to swallow my last breath. Just before being completely enveloped, I glimpsed the creature's great maw opening, its voice a monstrous whisper that promised both torment and temptation. "Welcome home, Captain." The world spun like a carousel gone rogue, seizing my thoughts and emotions in a maddening whirl. I felt metal beneath me, hard, unyielding. I gasped, inhaling the stench of rusted iron and brine. Instantly, flickers of memory flashed through my mind like strobing lights. Images of my crewmates, shadows of laughter, the vibrant pulse of life, moments pinned against the abyss threatening to claim me. Lifting my head, I found myself sprawled on a cold, grimy floor beneath the rig's foundation, shrouded in an unsettling darkness that seemed to hum with its own malignancy. A flickering light bulb hung precariously above, casting a sickly glow that barely breached the surrounding gloom. With a shiver, I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, the aftershocks of dread pulsating through my body like an erratic heartbeat. Inhaling sharply, I braced myself against the chill creeping across my skin. "Hello?" My voice trembled, echoing hollowly against unyielding silence. No response came, just the relentless, eerie cacophony of dripping water and the pervasive feeling that something lurked nearby watching, waiting. As I floundered through the dim recesses, the sickly light framed grotesque shapes around rusted machinery, groaning with age, as if the very structure itself was alive, filled with whispers of tragedies past. The air thickened with an oppressive sense of foreboding, each breath a struggle against the malevolence trapped in this haunted underbelly. Electricity crackled in the shadows, the lingering hint of the creature I thought I'd escaped clawing at the corners of my mind. The remnant laughter of the damned echoed like a haunting melody, rising and falling, urging me further into the heart of the darkness. Instinctively, I pushed down the rising tide of panic. Memories flickered me crew, their smiles a talisman I tried to clutch against the gnawing despair. Desperation clawed at me as I stumbled deeper into the bowels of the rig. Every step reverberated, each sound a reminder of my isolation. Abruptly, I stopped, the dim light revealing the outline of a door, wedged partially open. A wave of warmth beckoned, filled with the scent of something familiar. This was where I'd often gathered my crew, where laughter melded with the hum of machinery, a place I'd cherished in my heart. Pushing the door wider, I stepped inside, but the warmth shifted as though it was merely a memory passing through, replaced by ice. The room was in disarray. Equipment lay scattered among debris, papers uprooted in a chaotic dance, yet the edges of the atmosphere buzzed with a strange desperation, like the moment before a storm. My heart raced. Each breath felt burdened, every heartbeat a signal in the silence that heralded unseen things. Fingers trembling, I reached for a faded photograph half buried under scraps of metal, a shot of my crew, all grins and spirit, before shadow swallowed our lives. Panic surged again as I scanned the room. What if this darkness had already claimed them? Clenching the photo, I braced my knees, feeling the pang of loss shoot through me, as a shadow flickered in the corner of my eye. Suddenly, a harsh clang echoed through the doorway. I turned, the dim light barely piercing the darkness that loomed outside. Breathing railed in my throat as the shadows thickened, curling like smoke in the haunting frame where sound had just erupted. A voice broke the heavy stillness, a whisper woven through with malice. "Captain." Adrenaline flooded my veins, electrifying every fiber of my being. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice cracking, desperately trying to assert my presence against the tide of fear surging through me. The response was unnerving. The whispers swelled, mournful and melodic, cresting like a rising tide. "To remember, to relive. Our fates are intertwined, Captain." From the depths of the void beyond the threshold, a figure emerged, dressed in shadows that flickered beneath the twisted light, its face obscured in darkness. I could discern the gleam of eyes, hollow yet glistening with knowing. A creeping familiarity washed over me, a mix of recognition and terror. "Lila?" I breathed, the name a fragile thread that stitched together fragments of my past. But this visionless apparition was not the daughter I had lost. It was a distortion, a reflection of my guilt and grief, warped by my own tormented soul. "Join us, Father." The words curled around me, soft yet heavy, sending shivers racing down my spine. "You can't escape. We've been waiting for you." A door creaked open behind me, the darkness spilling forth and slithering across the floor like a living thing. I desperately grasped the edges of the room, the familiar space spiraling away as waves of shadows threatened to tear me from what remained of myself. "Lila, no!" I cried out, grappling for the warmth of memory, the light of hope, fighting to shatter the chains that bound me. But no sound existed except for the echoing whispers crawling beneath my skin, tempting me to yield. Suddenly, faint laughter erupted from the shadowy figure before me, twisting into a symphony of sorrow and delight. "Come back to us. There is no salvation here, only belonging." With a surge of primal instinct, I tore myself free from their grasp, a raw scream spilling from my lips that shattered the silence, reverberating through the shadows with all the pain I had buried in an instant. A piercing scream responded from the darkness outside the door, shuddering into my bones. My eyes snapped toward the source, and as if the shadows parted in response, a multitude of figures surged forward, their forms writhing, familiar faces distorted and twisted beyond recognition. I staggered back, terror rushing through me, as realization slammed like a hammer. I had awakened them, drawn their attention from the depths. And now, they were coming for me. The riotous laughter of the lost rose to a chilling crescendo, drowning my efforts to scream and warning me that escape was an impossibility. The figures cascaded through the doorway, melding into the light as they flooded the room, reaching for me with hands outstretched, beckoning. The relentless torrent closed in, and as their fingers brushed against my skin, panic ignited into pure terror. I could feel them pulling me under, dragging me into their grasp, body and soul, into the all-consuming void. "Welcome home, Captain." Their voices coalesced, a dissonant harmony wrapping around my frantic thoughts, resonating with promise and despair, a harrowing echo that would shatter the very last fragments of my will. And as the shadows encircled me, a desperate whisper clawed through the tumult, signaling the final depths of horror awaiting me. "You're one of us now." Then darkness surged, claiming my vision, dousing the flickering light, until even my screams faded into their eternal symphony. I awoke gasping, drenched in a sweat that pooled beneath heavy limbs, the darkness clawing at my throat, suffocating every remnant of hope. The visions flashed behind my eyes, moments of dimly lit corners beneath the rig, twisted faces of my crew echoing their silent pleas and jeers. Confined to my cell, a grim lock held me captive, measuring time in tortured whispers demanding I surrender to the abyss, a hollow temptation for eternal togetherness bathed in despair. Yet as I rose from the cold floor, something had changed. The air was different, heavy with anticipation, a charging atmosphere vibrating with a pulse that thrummed through the metal walls like a heartbeat. Stark realization cut through the remnants of my dreams, and I felt the presence lurking close. Just on the other side of the shuddering walls, the sound of countless souls, their roiling sorrow waiting for me to submit. "No," I muttered through gritted teeth, summoning strength from within. I was not yet willing to give in. Despite the shadows inching toward me, their whispers curling around my ankles like vicious serpents, I was still alone in playing this horrific game, still bearing the last fragments of my own identity, My rightful place, captain of Oil Rig 32. I gripped the edges of a nearby table, the screws stripped, but still desperate for my strength, pulling me to my feet. Above me, a flickering light sputtered to life, revealing the oddly familiar surroundings and office I had occupied countless times. Yet now, it broadcast an aura reeking of abandonment, a space drenched in memories soaked with betrayal. This was not merely a place. It felt alive with foreboding and tension, each corner echoing with the countdown to my fate. Free your crew, the shadows murmured, coalescing into fleeting images of them, twisted and grotesque, shimmering bravely, yet fading ominously. In that moment, clarity gripped meth horror of reality. Could they all have become what I feared? My resolve flickered, whispering promises, urging me to join that procession, to safeguard their legacy by relinquishing my autonomy. No, I snarled, the word a desperate breath. But the creatures beyond the lock began to whisper in unison, their voices serrated with longing and hunger, overwhelming like the tide. They were urging, beckoning, promising a rush of camaraderie through submission. Join us, but something surged deep within me. I stumbled back, grappling for breath, and the world twisted, memories colliding into one another, a chaotic mosaic of faces, laughter, and the wretched pang of loss. My hands clenched into fists. You will not have me, I shrieked, my voice now raw with defiance. As if in response, the shadows quaked, coiling like a hostile storm. All that might lie beneath the waves bore down upon me. With a horrifying clarity, I understood I was made of this darkness but not yet consumed. The rig was not merely a structure. It was a host for this malignant presence, absorbing stories, legacies, and souls to feed a monstrous appetite. The truth twisted upon itself, the foundation itself bemoaned decades, and without those stories, I was nothing but another lost soul. But now was not the moment for surrender. Drawing deep from the well of courage buried within, I charged toward the door, propelled not by fear, but sheer instinct for survival. I felt the surface shudder beneath my weight, heard the low growl of eroded metal shifting in response to the tumult of my resolve. When I reached the door, freezing cold met me, a final barrier of despair separating me from the haunting depths, as if mocking my desperate plea. I braced against it, heart hammering, summoning every ounce of determination. I am Captain Harris, and this is my home, I shouted, smashing my body against the door. To my astonishment, it splintered with an eerie ease, unleashing a cascade of darkness that swirled around me. I plunged into the corridor, lights struggling to remain flickering against the tide that surged. The air crackled, charged with energy, and as I raced toward the control room, a sickening realization nestled. In my gut, this wouldn't end easily. I in the shadows just beyond my reach. Faces emerged me, crew entangled in swaths of black, eyes burning in the dim light like shards of glass. Their cries cascaded forth. The promises of belonging and surrender clamored with the ache of betrayal. I skidded to a halt, watching their contorted figures, no longer friends, but nightmares born of anguish. Stop, I begged, grasping at the phantoms that teased toward me, drowning out reason with lingering memories of laughter and light. Captain, join us, and you will never suffer alone. Their voices merged, a haunting harmony that twisted through the corridor, resonating against my heartbeat. And there it was, the final piece of the puzzle. I could lead, I could fight or perish, but they needed to know they didn't belong to the shadows. I caught a glimpse of the glimmering fluctuation beneath the mass of despair, the key to an unfathomable truth that extended beyond life alone. I squared my shoulders. An indefinable force surged forward, barreling as I haphazardly wove through the living tapestry of darkness pulling at me. No, we fight together. Eyes narrowed. I hurled myself onward towards the depths of the control room, a sanctuary stripped of safety, panic, resolve, despair all slid against the threshold of choice as the command center flickered to life around me. Screens erupted one after another, revealing the vast expanse just beyond the rig-in endless ocean of night, where spectral forms danced just beneath the waves, each shadow parasite waiting to reclaim what was theirs. In that moment of horrifying clarity, the screens showed me their fate. The growing mass joined with the dark depths. Voices whispering secrets of ancient evils reunited in chains they forced on all who dared tread these haunted waters. This was home, yes, but it was also the creature they had become. With a final surge of ferocity, I slammed the emergency beacon, every ounce of desperation coursing through me, as the siren blared its warning across the depths. Your kin will remember you. I won't lose you to this. The shadows recoiled, a flicker of fear mingling within their alluring grasp, as if the darkness hesitated, wary of the fire that threatened to consume them. But the shadows gathered anew, creeping forth with heightened frenzy, an avalanche of despair. They flexed and united, clutching at me desperately. "Welcome home, Captain," they rasped, a chilling reminder that though I fought fiercely, I was not yet free. Those whispers doubled back on themselves as my resolve began to fissure. My heart pulsed against my chest, pounding out the rhythm of fury and failure. There was no escape. Above their wretched laughter, amongst the cacophony approaching to engulf me, I understood it was forever entangled in this twisted fabric. Ferocious darkness lashed to spirit an eternal dance. But intertwined within the nocturne of terror, a truth shimmered faintly beneath it all. I had the power to fight back, to lead them forth despite darkness trying to claim victory. The fractured symphony of my soul beat in time with their mournful songs, as every heartbeat surged anew. Together, I roared, the words of defiance against the void. We will survive. We are not shadows. We are here. And as we surged forward against the darkness, forging through the tendrils that reached to snare us, I held on to the final clarity that echoed as the unwinding threat coiled around USA. A promise echoed in the voice of my crew, forever entwined in eternal shadows, yet learning to resist, for the depths are not the end. So long as we remember, we shall rise, but even as hope collided with dread, the shadows still lingered, a reminder of what waits just beyond the threshold, a promise of oblivion leading into our pasts, where darkness hungered for the stories we dared to tell. And so, in that moment, a chilling thought crawled through my mind as I fought against the tide closing in around us. But what if we can never escape the very depths of our darkness?